Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The heat came in waves that could kill. Jake's hands burned against scorched earth, each forward crawl grinding sand into torn flesh. His pilot's uniform hung in shreds, the insignia peeling like dead skin. He'd stopped sweating an hour ago. His body had nothing left to give, but he kept moving. Lily's arm looped through his belt, her small body dragging behind him. 7 years old, unconscious since the crash. Her lips cracked and bleeding, breathing so shallow he had to stop every few minutes to press his ear to her chest, listening for the flutter of life beneath fragile ribs. Still there, still fighting. Ahead, a fortress rose from the wasteland. Starship hulls welded into walls, cargo containers stacked 3 stories high, scaffolding made from landing struts. The whole structure shimmered in the heat like a mirage, but it was real. Had to be real because there was nothing else for kilometers in every direction. Jake's vision tunneled. 10 meters. 5. His fingers scraped rust and he collapsed against the gate, cheek pressed to metal that smelled like blood and engine oil. He tried to speak. Nothing came but a wheeze. The gate shrieked open, metal grinding metal. A shadow blocked the brutal sun. She stood there like carved stone, turquoise skin mapped with deliberate burn scars, ritual marks forming patterns across arms and collarbone, eyes pale silver, cold as starlight, hair cropped to stubble, armor pieced from salvage, breastplate from a cargo hauler, pauldrons from thruster housings, boots stamped with aerospace manufacturer logos. Behind her, warriors in patchwork gear held spears, faces carved hard by unforgiving life. Jake forced his hand up, pointing weakly at Lily. "Water," the word scraped out. "Please, she's just..." The woman moved fast, her spear pressed against his throat, tip dimpling skin, promising how easily it could punch through. "Water's earned here." Her voice had the texture of grinding gears. "Not given, not begged for." She pressed harder and Jake felt skin break, warm blood trickling down his neck. "You serve, or we take what meat you have. Both of you." Jake's vision swam. He tried to find words, some plea that would move this woman, but her eyes were flat, empty of mercy. She tilted her head, considering him like roadkill. Then nodded sharply. 2 warriors stepped forward, grabbed Lily roughly, hauling her up between them. Her head lolled back, dark hair falling across her face. "No!" Jake tried to lunge, but his body wouldn't respond. The woman crouched down, bringing her face level with his. Up close, scars weren't just on her skin. One ran temple to jaw, puckered and pale. "Your daughter lives as long as you're useful. Try to run, try to fight. She dies first. Understand?" Jake nodded. What else could he do? "Good." She gestured to other warriors. "Get him inside. Let him drink just enough to walk." They dragged him through the gates. Everything went dark. Jake woke to cold metal against his cheek and machinery grinding nearby. His mouth tasted like copper and sand. Someone had given him water. Not much, just enough to pull him back from death's edge. His throat still felt like sandpaper, but he could swallow. That was something. He pushed up slowly, muscles screaming. He was in a workshop, cramped, hot despite metal walls. Workbenches lined the perimeter, covered with salvaged tech. Circuit boards, hydraulic pistons, nav computers with cracked casings. Everything scavenged, repaired, jury-rigged. The woman stood over him, arms crossed. In dim light, her scars looked darker, more pronounced. She held a dented flask and tossed it at his feet with a hollow clunk. "Drink. You'll need your strength." Jake grabbed the flask with shaking hands and unscrewed the cap. Water inside was murky, brown tinged, tasting of rust and something organic he didn't want to identify. But it was wet. He drank half and forced himself to stop, body screaming for more. "My daughter, follow me." She turned and walked out without waiting. Jake stumbled after her through narrow corridors formed by stacked containers, past open spaces where families huddled in shade, children with hollow eyes watching him pass. They emerged into a central courtyard. In the middle sat a massive machine, 3 meters tall, twice as wide, built from a dozen different water purification systems welded into one monster of filters, pipes, and pressure tanks. It wheezed and sputtered, leaking from a dozen joints, belching sulfur-smelling steam. Jake recognized the basic architecture, industrial-grade purifiers meant for colony ships. But this one was dying, held together by desperation and scrap. Next to the purifier, in shade created by a stretched tarp, was a cot. Lily lay there, so small and still. A guard stood nearby, a woman with ritual scars across her cheekbones. She held a cup of murky water, carefully dripping it past Lily's lips, just enough to keep her alive. Jake's chest tightened. "Let me..." The scarred woman stepped between him and his daughter. "Fix the purifier first. When it runs clean, she drinks clean, not before." Jake tore his eyes from Lily and forced himself to focus on the machine. He approached slowly, running hands over pipes, checking connections, listening to pump rhythms. 15 years as a ship mechanic before earning his pilot's license. He knew systems like this, could rebuild them in his sleep. The problem revealed itself quickly, too quickly. A pressure regulator missing from the main line. Without it, the system couldn't maintain proper filtration cycles. But it wasn't broken or lost. He could see mounting brackets, freshly unscrewed. Someone had removed it deliberately. He turned, scanning the courtyard, spotted it almost immediately. A titanium valve assembly sitting on a workbench under a tarp 3 meters away. Not hidden, just set aside. Jake walked over and picked it up, feeling the weight. He held it up so she could see. "You're starving your own children to test me?" His voice came out harder than intended, anger cutting through exhaustion. "This was working. You broke it." Her expression didn't change, but something flickered behind pale eyes. She crossed the distance in 2 strides and slapped the valve from his hand. It clattered against metal floor, sounds sharp in sudden silence. "I'm ensuring survival." Each word precise and cold. "Trust is a weakness, a disease that kills." That's insane. My son trusted an outsider once. Her voice dropped lower, taking on a razored edge. "A man who stumbled into our camp just like you. Desperate, begging, promising he could help repair our old purifier if we gave him shelter. We did. Fed him, gave him water. My son worked beside him for 3 days." She stepped closer, invading his space, forcing him to meet her eyes. "On the 4th day, the man vanished. 2 hours later, the purifier exploded. Killed 7 people. My son was standing 5 meters from the blast." Jake's anger drained away, replaced by something colder. "That wasn't me." "No, but you're an outsider. You crashed here. You need us. And I need to know if you're the kind who fixes things or the kind who breaks them when no one's watching." She bent down, picked up the valve, pressed it into his chest hard enough to hurt. "So fix it. Prove you're worth the water you've drunk. Prove your daughter deserves to live." She walked away, leaving him standing there with understanding settling in his gut. This wasn't just about the purifier. This was about a mother who'd watched her child die because she'd made the mistake of trusting a stranger. And now he was that stranger. Jake turned back to the machine, hands shaking. He approached the purifier and began examining the valve housing. That's when he saw the second problem. The valve in his hands was wrong, close but not close enough. Threading didn't match. Even forced, pressure differential would blow the seals within an hour. He looked back at the scarred woman. She was watching from across the courtyard, expression unreadable. "This won't work," he called out. "Wrong specifications. I need a TC9 series valve, titanium alloy with reverse thread seals. This is TC7. It'll fail." For a long moment she just stared, then walked back over, moving with predatory grace. She took the valve from him and examined it, turning it over in her hands. "You're telling me the truth? Test me if you want. Force me to install it. But when it blows, I won't be able to fix it a second time. We'll all die of thirst together." She studied his face, searching for deception. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she pocketed the valve and made a decision. "There's a ship graveyard, 20 kilometers northwest. Old colony transport, military frigate, civilian cruisers. If a TC9 exists anywhere on this planet, it'll be there." She looked up at the sky, squinting against glare. "Sandstorms building on the horizon. We leave now. We might beat it. Maybe. What about Lily? She stays under guard. Insurance that you come back. The woman's expression softened by the smallest fraction. She'll be fed, watered, safe. Safer here than out there. Jake wanted to argue, but the logic was brutal and clear. He couldn't take Lily into a sandstorm. Couldn't fix the purifier without the right part. Trapped in a choice that wasn't a choice at all. "What's your name?" he asked. She seemed surprised by the question. "Kaylin. I'm Jake." He glanced back at Lily one more time, seeing the steady rise and fall of her small chest. "Let's go get your valve." They left through a smaller gate on the north side, just the two of them. Kaylin moved fast, long legs eating ground, and Jake had to push himself to keep pace. She carried a pack loaded with tools and water rations, long knife strapped to her thigh, salvaged plasma cutter holstered across her back. He'd been given nothing but a crowbar and a blade sharpened so many times it was half its original width. The landscape was murder. Cracked earth stretched to the horizon, broken by rock formations thrusting up like broken teeth. In the distance, silhouettes of dead ships rose against sky. Massive hulks that had crashed here decades or centuries ago, stripped of anything valuable, left to rust. They walked in silence for the first hour. Jake focused on breathing, on moving, on not collapsing. Water he'd been given was barely enough, and heat pressed down like a physical weight. His flight suit clung to him, soaked through with sweat that evaporated almost immediately. Kaylin never looked back to check if he was keeping up. She moved with absolute confidence, navigating by landmarks Jake couldn't identify. The storm was building. He could see it now, a dark smudge on the northwestern horizon, growing wider as they walked. "We won't make it back before that hits," he said. "No, we'll have to shelter in the graveyard. Wait it out." "How long do storms last?" "Anywhere from 4 hours to 3 days. Jake thought about Lily, alone back at the compound. Thought about what could happen in 3 days. "Your people, they'll keep her safe. I gave the order. They'll follow it." Kaylin glanced at him sidelong. "You think I want her dead? She's leverage. Worthless if she's a corpse." The casual brutality hit Jake like a punch, but he couldn't argue with it. That cold pragmatism was the only reason Lily was still alive. They crested a rise and the ship graveyard spread before them, a valley choked with wreckage. Dozens of ships in various states of decay. Colony transports broken apart on impact. Hulls split open like seed pods. Military vessels bristling with weapon systems long since salvaged. Sleek personal cruisers that had probably belonged to wealthy refugees fleeing some forgotten war. Beautiful in a terrible way. All that ambition and technology reduced to monuments of failure. Kaylin led them down into the valley, moving between wrecks with practiced ease. She stopped at a military frigate lying on its side, hull scorched black from atmospheric entry. Sections of armor plating had been peeled away, revealing interior superstructure. "The frigate should have what we need. Engineering section, port side, if the valve housing is intact." They climbed through a breach in the hull, entering a corridor canted at 45 degrees. Interior was dark, lit only by shafts of light through gaps in damaged hull. Jake's boots crunched on broken glass and debris. Everything metal enough to be worth salvaging had been stripped, leaving only structural elements and detritus of a dead crew. Empty supply crates, shredded acceleration couches, a helmet with cracked visor. Kaylin moved ahead, checking each intersection carefully. Her hand never strayed far from the knife at her hip. Raiders use the wrecks as shelter sometimes. Keep your eyes open. They descended deeper, following twisted corridors and maintenance shafts. Heat was worse here, trapped and amplified by metal hull. Jake's water ration was almost gone. He forced himself to take small sips, making it last. They reached the engineering section, a cavernous space filled with the massive cylindrical housing of the ship's old reactor, long since depleted and inert. Coolant pipes thick as Jake's torso snaked across walls. And there, mounted on a control panel, was exactly what they needed. A pressure regulator assembly, TC9 series, titanium alloy still intact despite decades of exposure. "That's it," Jake said, moving toward it. Kaylin grabbed his arm, stopping him. "Wait," she pointed. The regulator was mounted on the far side of a collapsed bulkhead, a massive section of reinforced hull plating that had buckled and fallen, creating a lean-to of metal blocking their direct path. They could squeeze through, but the bulkhead was unstable, held up by nothing but friction and luck. "It could collapse if we're not careful," Kalen said. "Then we'll be careful." They approached slowly. Jake examined the bulkhead, running hands over edges, testing weight. Had to mass several tons at least. If it shifted, it would crush them before they could react. "I'll go in first," Jake said. "Get the regulator free. You stay here and watch the supports." Kalen shook her head. "Too heavy for one person if it starts to shift. We both go. Work fast." She was right. Jake hated that she was right. They squeezed through the gap, metal scraping against Jake's shoulders, pressing claustrophobia down on him. The space on the other side was tight, barely enough room for both to stand. The regulator was mounted with heavy bolts fused with age and heat. Jake pulled the plasma cutter from Kalen's pack and began cutting while she braced against the bulkhead, muscles straining as she held position. The cutter's beam was brilliant blue-white, throwing harsh shadows. Molten metal dripped and hissed. 1 bolt, 2, 3. The bulkhead groaned. "Faster!" Kalen said through gritted teeth. Jake cut faster, the plasma cutter whining. 4 bolts, 5. The regulator shifted, almost free. The bulkhead shifted too, a grinding metallic scream. Kalen planted her feet and pushed, whole body rigid with effort. Jake saw it then, the way her left shoulder hitched, a fraction of a second of hesitation where she couldn't quite get full strength. An old injury, compensated for but never fully healed. Without thinking, Jake shifted his angle, moving so he was taking more weight on his side, letting her redistribute to favor her right side. She noticed. Her eyes snapped to his, startled. He didn't say anything, just cut the last bolt and yanked the regulator free. "Got it, move!" They squeezed back through the gap. The moment they were clear, the bulkhead collapsed with thunderous crash, filling the space where they'd been standing with twisted metal and debris. They stood there, breathing hard, covered in dust. Kalen looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since they'd met. There was something in her expression, not trust, not yet, but recognition, like she'd seen something she hadn't expected. "You pulled your weight to favor my bad shoulder," she said. Jake shrugged. "You were compensating. Figured you'd gotten hurt there before. Colony raid 3 years ago. Dislocated it fighting. It healed wrong." She touched her left shoulder unconsciously. "No one's noticed that before. Or if they did, they didn't care. I was a mechanic before I was a pilot. You learn to spot when a system's under stress." He held up the regulator. "We good?" Kalen nodded slowly. Then, "The explosion that killed my son. I was standing right next to him when it went off. I got the scars." She gestured to her arm, where burn marks formed intricate patterns. "We turned them into ritual marks later, to honor the dead, but he got the blast full on. Didn't even have time to scream." The raw pain in her voice cut deeper than any blade. Jake felt it resonate with something in his own chest, a wound that hadn't healed. "My wife died in the crash," he said. Words felt like pulling glass from his throat. 3 days ago, we hit debris we couldn't avoid. I was piloting. She was in navigation. The hull breach took her section first. He had to stop, force himself to breathe. I sealed the breach to save Lily. My wife was on the other side. I heard her on the comm, asking me to wait, to find another way. I sealed it anyway. Silence stretched between them, heavy and raw. "You made the right choice," Kalen said finally. "Doesn't make it hurt less." "No, it doesn't." Outside, the wind began to howl. The storm had arrived. They sheltered in the frigate's command deck, a space that still had most of its roof intact. Through cracked viewports, they could see the storm raging, a wall of sand and wind that turned the world orange and opaque. The ship groaned and shuddered under assault, metal screaming against metal. Kalen rationed out water and protein bars that tasted like compressed sawdust. They sat against opposite walls, the regulator valve between them like a prize they'd won. "Why'd you crash?" Kalen asked. "Debris field we didn't see until too late. Navigation systems were glitching. We were trying to reach SETI colony on the far side of the planet." Jake picked at the protein bar without eating. "Never made it. Don't even know if the colony still exists." "It doesn't. Raiders destroyed it 4 years ago. Killed anyone who didn't flee." Jake absorbed that, feeling the last hope he'd been carrying drain away. So we crashed on a dead world for nothing. Not dead, just dying. Kaylin leaned her head back against the wall. There are a dozen settlements like ours scattered across the planet, all of us refugees from somewhere else, all trying to survive until the next supply ship arrives. When's that? Been 3 years since the last one. Contract said every 18 months, so we're overdue. She smiled without humor. Or they decided we weren't worth the fuel. The storm hammered against the hull, a constant roar that made conversation nearly impossible. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the world try to tear itself apart. Eventually, Kaylin spoke again, raising her voice over the wind. You really didn't know the valve was the wrong type? You weren't trying to sabotage the purifier? I'm not your dead son's murderer, Jake said. I'm just a man trying to keep his daughter alive. That's the only agenda I have. She studied him for a long moment. I believe you. It was a small thing, just 3 words, but they carried weight. The man who killed your son, Jake said. Did you ever find him? Kaylin's expression went cold and hard. No, he disappeared into the wastelands. Could be dead, could be with another settlement, could be leading a raider clan. Her hand moved to her knife. But if I ever see him again, I'll make sure his death takes a long time. The venom in her voice was absolute. Jake didn't doubt she meant every word. The storm hammered against the hull for hours. In the oppressive silence between wind gusts, Kaylin's voice cut through the darkness. You sealed the breach that killed your wife, she said. Not a question, a statement. Jake's jaw tightened. Yes. To save your daughter. Yes. Kaylin leaned forward slightly, her pale eyes catching what little light remained. And now you're fixing our purifier. Helping strangers. Very noble. She paused, letting the words hang. Or very calculated. Jake felt ice slide down his spine. What are you saying? I'm saying I've seen desperate men do desperate things. Men who smile and help and earn trust, right up until they don't need you anymore. Her hand moved to her knife. How do I know you're not planning to steal supplies once the purifier works? Take your daughter and vanish into the wastelands? Because I'm not. Your wife's body is probably still in that crashed ship, Kaylin continued, voice flat and merciless. You left her there, unsealed, exposed. You haven't even tried to go back for her. What kind of man does that? The accusation hit like a physical blow. Jake's hands clenched into fists. I had no choice. Lily was dying. There's always a choice. You chose survival over grief, over honor. Kaylin's eyes were unreadable in the darkness. So tell me, Jake, what happens when survival means leaving us behind too? The silence stretched between them, poisonous and thick. Then Jake spoke, his voice raw. If I wanted to run, I'd already be gone. I don't need your permission or your trust, but Lily deserves better than a father who runs, better than a father who only knows how to save people by abandoning others. He met Kaylin's eyes. I'm done running. From my wife's death, from my choices, from responsibility. You want to test me? Fine, but stop comparing me to the man who killed your son. Kaylin held his gaze for a long, tense moment. Then she nodded slowly. Good answer. Was this another test? Everything is a test, until it isn't. She leaned back against the wall. But I believe you, for now. The storm outside began to die. When dawn came, the wind ceased entirely, leaving the world scoured, clean and silent. But the tension between them had transformed into something else. Understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of it. They climbed out of the wreck and began the long walk back to the compound. They arrived at the gates as the sky darkened toward evening, both covered in dust and exhaustion. Guards opened the gates without question, eyes following Kaylin with respect or fear. Jake couldn't tell which. He went straight to Lily. She was still unconscious, but her breathing seemed stronger. The guard had been giving her water regularly, keeping her hydrated. Jake pressed his hand to her forehead and felt her fever had broken slightly. I'm back, he whispered. I'm here. Kaylin appeared beside him with the regulator valve. Get to work. I'll have food and clean water brought. Jake forced himself to move, body screaming in protest. He approached the purifier and began the delicate work of installing the TC9. His hands shook from exhaustion, but his knowledge was solid. He knew every connection, every seal, every pressure point. It took 4 hours. 4 hours of careful work while his daughter lay unconscious 10 meters away. 4 hours of adjusting, testing, recalibrating. The compound's population began to gather, watching in silence. Children with hollow eyes, adults with expressions carved hard by survival. All of them waiting to see if the outsider would save them or doom them. Finally, Jake activated the system. The purifier coughed, wheezed, then caught. The grinding noise smoothed into a steady hum. Pressure gauges climbed into green and held, and from the output valve, clear water began to flow. Not murky brown sludge that had been killing them slowly, but genuine, clean water. The crowd erupted, not cheering, too tired for that, too worn down, but relief, visible and overwhelming. People rushed forward with cups and containers, filling them with water they could actually drink without fear. Kaylin brought a metal cup to Lily and carefully dripped clean water past her lips. Jake watched, throat tight. Lily's eyes fluttered, opened. She looked up at Kaylin with confusion, then passed her to Jake. "Dad?" Jake was at her side instantly, pulling her into his arms. She was so small, so fragile. He'd almost lost her, almost failed her the way he'd failed her mother. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here. You're safe." Lily clung to him, trembling. "Where's Mom?" The question hit like a physical blow. He'd known it was coming, had dreaded it, but nothing could have prepared him for innocent confusion in his daughter's voice. "Mom," he had to force the words out. "Mom didn't make it, Lily. There was an accident. She's gone." Lily's face crumpled. She buried her face in his chest and sobbed, small body shaking with grief. Jake held her, tears streaming down his own face, heart breaking into pieces. Kaylin stood nearby, watching. Her expression was unreadable, but something in her eyes, some ancient recognition of loss, made her turn away, giving them privacy. The moment of peace lasted exactly 3 minutes. Then the explosion started. The first blast took out the north wall. The second hit the gate they'd entered through days ago. The third detonated in the center of the compound, sending shrapnel screaming through the air. Kaylin was moving before echoes faded, shouting orders in a language Jake didn't understand. Warriors grabbed weapons and scrambled to defensive positions. Parents dragged children toward shelter. Jake grabbed Lily and ran for cover behind the purifier's housing, his body wrapped around hers. He looked over the edge and saw them coming through breached walls. Raiders, maybe 20 of them, wearing mismatched armor and carrying weapons that ranged from crude pipe guns to military-grade plasma rifles. But these weren't desperate scavengers. They moved with discipline, covering each other, advancing in coordinated patterns. Professional, military-trained, and they all wore the same crude insignia painted on their armor, a broken gear crossed with a blade. Kaylin saw the insignia and froze. Just for a second, but Jake saw it. Raw, unfiltered fear. One of the raiders stepped forward, pulling off his helmet. He was older, maybe 50, with a cybernetic eye glowing red in dim light and a scar bisecting his face from forehead to jaw. He smiled when he saw Kaylin, showing teeth filed to points. "Hello, Kaylin. It's been a long time." Her voice came out strangled. "Vex, you remember me. I'm touched." Vex gestured at his raiders. "Hold positions. Let's talk first." Kaylin's hand was on her knife, but she didn't draw it. Jake could see the calculation in her eyes. Outnumbered, outgunned, caught completely off guard. "What do you want?" Kaylin demanded. "Want? I want to finish what I started 3 years ago." Vex's cybernetic eye focused on her with predatory intensity. "I want to watch your settlement burn. I want to see you lose everything, just like you made me lose everything. You sabotaged the purifier. You killed my son." "Your son?" Vex laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "Your son was weak. He trusted me, believed every lie I told him while I rigged the charges. When he died confused, wondering why his new friend would hurt him." He leaned forward. "I did you a favor. Taught you that trust is fatal, didn't I?" Kaylin's face had gone pale beneath turquoise skin. Her whole body trembled with barely contained rage. "Why? What did we ever do to you? You existed, in territory I wanted, with resources I needed. but you were too strong to take in a fair fight. So I weakened you, sabotaged you, and when I was ready, I came back to finish the job." He glanced past Kalen, and his cybernetic eye locked onto Jake, crouched behind the purifier with Lily. "Another naive fool you brought home, Kalen?" Vex's voice dripped with mockery. "This one will die just like your son did. And maybe his daughter too. Make it poetic." The words detonated something inside Kalen. She lunged forward, knife drawn, a scream of pure rage tearing from her throat. Vex's raiders opened fire. Plasma bolts and projectiles filled the air. Kalen dove behind cover, her warriors returning fire from defensive positions. The compound erupted into chaos. Running figures, screaming, sharp crack of gunfire and whine of energy weapons discharging. Jake pressed Lily down, covering her body with his own. A plasma bolt hit the purifier housing above them, melting through metal, sending molten droplets raining down. He smelled burning circuits and vaporized coolant. "Stay down!" he shouted at Lily. "Don't move!" Kalen appeared beside them, blood streaming from a cut above her eye. "They're going to push us straight through. We can't hold them." "What do you need me to do?" "The pumping station, east side of the compound." She grabbed his shoulder, grip iron hard. "If they take it, they can shut down the whole water system. Months of work destroyed. We'll die of thirst before we can rebuild." "I'll go. I'm coming with you." They ran, keeping low, using wreckage and storage containers for cover. Jake carried Lily despite her protests, refusing to leave her behind. Raiders spotted them and opened fire, but Kalen returned shots with her plasma cutter, the improvised weapon surprisingly effective at close range. They reached the pumping station, a squat building built from reinforced container walls. The door was sealed, but Kalen had the access code. They burst inside and found the space mercifully empty. The station's interior was all pipes and pumps. The heart of the water distribution system, pressure gauges lined one wall, valves and control panels covering the others. And in the center, the main circulation pump, a massive piece of machinery that kept clean water flowing throughout the compound. "Lock the door," Kalen ordered. "If they breach it, we defend here." Jake set Lily down in the corner, away from machinery. "Stay there. Don't move no matter what happens." She nodded, face streaked with tears and dust. Outside, the battle intensified. They could hear explosions, closer now. Vex's raiders were pushing forward, overwhelming Kalen's defenders through sheer firepower. Then came a massive explosion that shook the entire building. The lights flickered and died, replaced by dim red emergency lighting. Alarms screamed, and from somewhere in the machinery, Jake heard a sound that turned his blood to ice. A high-pitched whine, building in frequency, the unmistakable sound of a system about to fail catastrophically. "The coolant line!" Jake ran to the control panel, reading pressure gauges by hellish red light. "The explosion ruptured the primary cooling system. The main pipe is going to blow." Kalen was beside him instantly. "Can you fix it?" Jake traced pipes with his eyes, following them to where they disappeared into the pump housing. The main coolant line was buried inside the machinery, pressurized and superheated. He could see it already. A section of pipe glowing incandescent through the maintenance access panel, metal warping from heat and pressure. "The rupture point is inside the housing. We can weld it shut, but someone has to hold the breach closed while the other welds. The pipe is..." He checked the temperature gauge and felt his stomach drop. 1,600 degrees. "Anyone who touches it dies," Kalen finished. "How long to weld?" "Maybe 90 seconds. Maybe 2 minutes." They both understood what that meant. 90 seconds of holding flesh against metal hot enough to melt steel. No one could survive that. The burns alone would be fatal, even if initial contact didn't kill through sheer shock. Jake looked at Lily, huddled in the corner, eyes wide and terrified. He'd already failed her mother. He couldn't fail her, too. "I'll do it," he said, moving toward the maintenance access. Kalen grabbed him and shoved him back with brutal force. He stumbled, caught himself against the wall. "No," she said. "What?" "Lily needs a father." Kalen's voice was absolutely steady. "She's already lost her mother. She can't lose you too." "You can't..." "My son is dead. I have no children left. No one who needs me." She was already moving toward the access panel, pulling on work gloves even though they'd provide no real protection. "But you have a reason to survive. She does." Jake tried to grab her, but she was faster. She wrenched open the access panel, and heat that came out was like opening a furnace door. The coolant pipe was visible inside, a section glowing white-hot, metal rippling and buckling. "Get the welder!" Kalen shouted. Jake's hands moved on autopilot, grabbing the plasma welder from the tool rack, checking the charge. Full. Enough for the job if he worked fast. Kalen positioned herself in front of the access panel, bracing her feet. "When I'm in position, you weld. Don't stop. Don't slow down. No matter what I say, no matter what I sound like, you finish the job. Understand?" "Kalen, please. Promise me." Her eyes locked onto his, fierce and desperate. "Promise me you'll finish it." "I promise." She nodded once. Then she reached into the housing and pressed her bare hands against the rupturing coolant pipe. Her scream was immediate and terrible, a sound that bypassed Jake's conscious mind and went straight to something primal. The smell hit a second later. Burning flesh, searing protein, the sweet, sick stench of cooking meat. "Weld it!" she roared through clenched teeth, voice breaking. Jake forced himself to move. He activated the plasma welder and aimed at the rupture point, where Kalen's hands were pressed against glowing metal. Her skin was already blackening, bubbling, flesh melting and fusing with the pipe. He could see her fingers curling involuntarily from pain, whole body rigid with agony. He welded. The plasma beam traced along the crack, sealing metal to metal, closing the breach millimeter by millimeter. His hands shook, but he forced them steady. 30 seconds. 45. Kalen's screams had become a constant, wordless keening. Tears streamed down her face. Her legs trembled, threatening to give out. But she held on, hands locked in place by pain and will, and literal fusion of flesh to metal. 60 seconds. Jake's vision blurred from sweat and tears. He blinked hard, kept welding. The seam was almost complete. 75 seconds. Kalen's voice broke into sobs, whole body shaking. "Finish it. Please, please finish it." 90 seconds. Jake completed the final centimeter of weld and the seam held, metal cooling from white to red to orange. The pressure stabilized. The alarm cut off, leaving only the steady hum of the pump. "Done!" Jake dropped the welder and grabbed Kalen as her legs gave out. She collapsed against him, her hands, what was left of them, still fused to the cooling pipe. Her palms were gone, burned away. The flesh of her fingers had melted and blackened, bone visible in places. "We have to get you free," Jake said, voice breaking. "This is going to hurt." "Already. Hurts." Kalen's words came out slurred, eyes unfocused. Shock was setting in. Jake examined the fusion point. Her hands had become part of the pipe, flesh and metal welded together by incomprehensible heat. The only way to free her was to break the seal, which meant ripping away what little flesh remained. "Lily," he called, "come here. I need you." His daughter approached slowly, face pale. "Is she going to die?" "Not if I can help it. Hold this." He handed her a torn piece of his shirt. "When I free her hands, press this against the wounds. As hard as you can. We need to stop the bleeding." Lily nodded, small jaw set with determination that broke his heart. Jake positioned himself, gripped Kalen around the waist, and pulled. The sound of flesh tearing away from metal was something he'd hear in nightmares for the rest of his life. Kalen screamed once, sharp and broken, then went silent, body going limp. She was free. Jake lowered her to the floor while Lily pressed the makeshift bandage against the ruined meat of Kalen's hands. Blood soaked through immediately, but the pressure slowed the flow. "Stay with us," Jake urged, tapping Kalen's face. "Stay awake. Look at me." Kalen's eyes fluttered open, clouded with pain. "The station? Saved. You saved it. Good." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Your daughter. She's brave." Jake looked at Lily, seeing tears streaming down her face even as she maintained pressure on Kalen's wounds. "Yeah, she is." Outside, the sounds of battle were changing. Fewer shots, more shouting. Kalen's warriors had rallied, were pushing back. The door to the pumping station burst open and 3 of Vex's raiders entered, weapons raised. They saw Kalen on the floor, bleeding, and smiled. Jake grabbed the plasma welder and activated it, putting himself between them and his daughter. "Get out!" The lead raider laughed. You going to stop us with a welding torch? If I have to. The raider raised his rifle, and his head exploded in a spray of blood and bone. The other two spun, trying to locate the threat, and died before they could complete the turn. Through the doorway came Kalen's warriors, faces grim, weapons still smoking. One of them, a woman with scars across her throat, knelt beside Kalen. "Commander, we pushed them back. Vex's forces are retreating." "Vex?" Kalen tried to sit up and failed. "Where is he?" "Fled. Took his remaining fighters and ran when he saw we weren't breaking." Kalen's expression twisted with rage and frustration. "Find him. I want him alive." "Already hunting him, Commander." More warriors entered, carrying medical supplies. They began treating Kalen's hands with the efficiency of people who'd patched battlefield wounds before. Jake stepped back, pulling Lily with him, giving them room to work. One of the medics, an older man with gentle hands, looked at Kalen's injuries and shook his head. "Commander, these burns, I can treat them, but you'll never have full use of these hands again. The nerve damage is too severe." "I don't need full use," Kalen said through gritted teeth. "I just need enough to hold a knife when I find Vex." They wrapped her hands in thick bandages, soaked in some kind of medicinal solution that smelled harsh and chemical. Kalen hissed in pain but didn't cry out. When they were finished, her hands looked like white clubs, wrapped so completely that her fingers were individual cocoons. Jake helped her to her feet. She was unsteady but refused to lean on him more than necessary. "The compound?" she asked. "Damaged but standing," the scarred woman reported. 12 dead, 23 wounded. But we held, and the purifier is intact. Kalen closed her eyes briefly. "The dead will be honored. See to the wounded first, then begin repairs." She looked at Jake. "You and your daughter, you fought alongside us. That means something." "We survived together," Jake said. "That's all." "No." Kalen's pale eyes met his. "It's more than that." They emerged from the pumping station into a compound transformed by violence. Bodies lay scattered, raiders and defenders alike. Scorch marks blackened walls where plasma bolts had hit. The north wall was a gaping wound, metal twisted and torn. But people were already moving, already working, dragging the wounded to shelter, putting out fires, beginning the grim task of identifying the dead. Kalen walked through it all with her head high despite her injuries, speaking to her people, giving orders, offering comfort where she could. Jake followed with Lily, watching this woman command respect through pure force of will. They reached the central courtyard where the purifier still hummed, untouched by battle. Clean water flowed from the output valve, precious and clear. Kalen stood there for a long moment, looking at it. "When Vex destroyed our old purifier, we almost didn't survive," she said quietly. "We drank contaminated water, got sick, children died, old people died. We were down to 40 people from 120. She touched the purifier with her bandaged hand. "This machine is more than survival. It's proof that we can rebuild, that we haven't given up." Jake understood. He'd felt the same way about the ship he'd been piloting, the one that had crashed and killed his wife. It wasn't just a machine, it was hope given physical form. "Vex will come back," Kalen said. "He won't stop until we're dead, or he is. Then we need to be ready." "We?" Kalen looked at him. "You're planning to stay?" Jake glanced down at Lily, who was holding his hand tightly. "Where else would we go? The colony's gone. We have no ship, and..." He paused, searching for the right words. "You gave everything to save us. Your hands, your safety. That's not something I can just walk away from." Kalen studied him for a long moment. Then she did something Jake hadn't seen her do before. She smiled. It was small, barely there, but genuine. "You're still an outsider," she said, "but maybe not just an outsider anymore." Over the next 3 days, they worked to rebuild, reinforced damaged walls with salvaged hull plating, buried the dead with whatever rituals their families requested, treated the wounded, rationed food and water to make supplies last. Jake worked alongside Kalen's warriors, using his mechanical knowledge to repair damaged systems and jury-rig new defenses. Lily helped where she could, carrying water, distributing food, staying close to her father. Kaylin pushed herself despite her injuries, refusing to rest even when her hands bled through the bandages. She was everywhere at once, overseeing repairs, training fighters, planning defenses for the next attack they all knew was coming. On the third night, scouts returned with news. They'd tracked Vex's raiders to another settlement, 40 kilometers south. A smaller compound, less well defended. Vex was recruiting, gathering strength for another assault. "How long do we have?" Kaylin asked. "A week, maybe 2. Kaylin nodded grimly. "Then we fortify, we prepare, and when he comes, we end this." Jake found her later that night, sitting alone on the wall overlooking the compound. Her bandaged hands rested in her lap, and she was staring out at the darkness beyond the walls. "You should be resting," he said, climbing up to sit beside her. "Can't sleep, hands hurt too much." She flexed her fingers slightly and winced. The medic was right. I'll never hold a weapon properly again. Can't grip a knife, can't aim a rifle. Everything I was, everything I built my identity on, gone. You saved everyone. That counts for something. Does it? Her voice was bitter. What good is a warrior who can't fight? A commander who can't defend her people? Jake was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. My wife was the navigator on our ship. I was just the pilot. She was the one who plotted courses, who found the safe routes, who kept us alive. When she died, I thought the same thing. What good is a pilot without a navigator? He looked up at the stars, barely visible through the haze. But then I realized something. We're not defined by what we've lost. We're defined by what we do with what remains. Kaylin turned to look at him. You sealed the breach that killed her. Yeah. And you live with that, every day. Every day, Jake agreed. It doesn't get easier, but Lily needs me. So I keep going, the same way your people need you. They need a warrior. They need a leader. Someone who'll sacrifice herself to save them. You've already proven you're that person. Kaylin absorbed that, expression unreadable. When Vex comes back, I won't be able to fight him. Not hand to hand. He'll kill me. Then we make sure you don't have to fight him hand to hand. How? Jake smiled, a plan forming. I'm a mechanic, remember? And we're sitting on a fortune in salvage. Let me show you what I can build. Over the next week, Jake transformed the compound's defenses. He rigged automated turrets from salvaged ship weapons, created choke points where defenders could concentrate fire, rebuilt the damaged walls with overlapping fields of fire. But his most ambitious project was personal. He found Kaylin in her quarters, a small room carved from a shipping container. She was struggling to eat, her bandaged hands making it nearly impossible to hold utensils. I have something for you, Jake said. He held out 2 metal gauntlets, crafted from lightweight alloy plating and mechanical actuators. They looked like armored gloves, but with servo motors built into the joints. What are these? Powered assistance. The servos will amplify whatever grip strength you have left and compensate for the nerve damage. You won't have full dexterity, but you'll be able to hold a weapon. Fight. Defend yourself. Kaylin stared at the gauntlets like they were a miracle. How long did this take you? 48 hours without sleep. But I owed you. Jake helped her remove the bandages, revealing the scarred, twisted flesh beneath. The burns had healed into thick keloid tissue, skin tight and shiny. Her fingers were crooked, locked in partially curled positions. Gently, he slid the gauntlets over her ruined hands. They sealed at the wrists, servos humming to life. Kaylin flexed her fingers, and the gauntlets responded, mechanical joints moving smoothly. Try gripping something, Jake suggested, handing her a knife. Kaylin's fingers closed around the hilt. The gauntlet servos engaged, reinforcing her grip. She held the knife steady, testing the weight, moving through combat forms. Her eyes were bright when she looked at him. This is not perfect. You'll need to retrain, learn how to compensate for the delay in the servo response. But it's something. It's everything. She moved closer, the knife still in her hand. Jake, I don't know how to... You don't have to say anything. But she did anyway. Thank you. Vex's attack came 2 days later, at dawn when the light was weak and eyes were tired from night watch. This time he brought an army, 60 raiders, maybe more, all heavily armed. They hit the compound from 3 sides simultaneously, coordinated and brutal. But Kaylin's people were ready, The automated turrets opened fire, cutting down the first wave. Raiders took cover and returned fire, but Jake's defensive improvements had made every approach a kill zone. Bodies fell, screams echoed, and still they kept coming. Vex was at the front, his cybernetic eye glowing red, a plasma rifle in his hands. He was screaming orders, driving his forces forward with threats and promises. Kaylin met him at the main gate, her gauntleted hands gripping a long combat blade. Around her, warriors formed a defensive line, shields raised, spears ready. "You should have run," Vex called out. "Should have fled when you had the chance." "I don't run," Kaylin said. "Not from cowards who kill children." Vex's face twisted with rage. "Your son was weak, just like you. Just like this entire pathetic settlement." He raised his rifle, but Kaylin was faster. She moved with the deadly efficiency of someone who'd spent their life fighting, the powered gauntlets compensating for her damaged hands. Her blade deflected his shot, and her boot caught him in the knee, buckling the joint. They fought in the ruins of the gate, close quarters where rifles were useless. Knife against knife, skill against rage. Vex was strong and experienced, but Kaylin was defending her home, her people, the memory of her son. She was relentless. The battle raged around them, but in that moment, it was just the two of them, settling a debt that had festered for 3 years. Kaylin drove him back, her blade opening cuts across his arms, his legs, his face. The gauntlets gave her the grip strength to hold position, to parry, to strike. Vex stumbled, his cybernetic eye sparking from damage. Kaylin's blade found his throat and pressed just hard enough to draw blood. "You killed my son," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "You destroyed my home. You tried to break us." "So kill me," Vex spat. "Get your revenge." Kaylin held the blade there for a long moment. Jake watched from nearby. Lily held close, both of them frozen. Then Kaylin pulled the blade back. "No, revenge is too easy, too clean." She looked at her warriors. "Take him. Put him in the deepest cell we have. He'll live to see us survive, thrive, rebuild. Every day he'll wake up, knowing he failed." They dragged Vex away, broken and beaten. His remaining raiders, seeing their leader captured, scattered into the wastelands. The battle was over. The compound fell into exhausted silence, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the crackling of fires being extinguished. The cost had been high, 18 more dead, dozens wounded, but they'd held, survived. Jake found Kaylin sitting against the purifier, her gauntleted hands resting on her knees. Blood stained her armor, but she seemed unhurt beneath it. "You let him live," Jake said, sitting beside her. "I did." "Why?" Kaylin was quiet for a long time. "Because my son would have wanted mercy. He was gentle, even in this harsh world. I let his death turn me cold, turned me into someone who tested outsiders by letting children go thirsty, turned me into someone who saw trust as weakness instead of strength." She looked at her gauntleted hands. "You trusted me to come back from the ship graveyard. You trusted me with your daughter's life, and I'm still learning what it means to deserve that trust." Jake understood. Grief did strange things to people, twisted them into shapes they barely recognized. He was still learning how to be a father without his wife, how to move forward when part of him wanted to stand still in that moment before he'd sealed the breach. "We're all learning," he said. Lily appeared carrying 2 cups of clean water. She offered one to Kaylin and one to her father. "The lady who guards the purifier said I could take these," she said shyly. "She said water is for everyone now." Kaylin took the cup, holding it carefully with her gauntleted hands. "Your daughter has good instincts." "Gets it from her mother," Jake said, his throat tight. They sat there in silence, the 3 of them, watching the compound slowly come back to life around them. People emerged from shelter, beginning the work of recovery. Children played near the purifier, splashing in the clean water. Somewhere someone was singing, a low, mournful song in a language Jake didn't know. "What happens now?" Jake asked. "Now we rebuild. Again. We reinforce. We prepare for whatever comes next." Kaylin looked at him. "And you?" "I don't know. We can't leave. No ship, no way off planet. Lily needs stability. Safety." He paused. "If you'll have us, we'll stay. Help build something worth defending." Kaylin nodded slowly. You've earned your place here. Both of you. More than earned it. She stood, wincing slightly, and offered Jake her gauntleted hand. Help me up? He took her hand and pulled her to her feet. They stood face to face. This woman who'd held his daughter hostage, and this man who'd been willing to sacrifice himself to save strangers. Thank you, Jake said, for saving us, for giving us a chance. You saved us first, Kaylin replied. Fixed the purifier, fought beside us, built these. She raised her gauntleted hands. We're even. Are we? She smiled, that rare expression that transformed her face. No, but it's a start. Dawn came slowly, the sky lightening from black to deep purple to gold. Jake stood on the wall again, watching the sunrise paint the wastelands in shades of amber and rose. Lily stood beside him, holding his hand. Is this home now, Dad? She asked. Jake thought about that. Home used to be the ship, then it was supposed to be the SETI colony. Now those places were gone, erased by violence and chance. But home wasn't a place, he was learning. It was the people you chose to stand beside when everything went to hell. Yeah, sweetheart, I think it is. Footsteps behind them. Kaylin climbed up, carrying a canteen of water. She'd changed into clean clothes, her armor set aside for now. The gauntlets were still on her hands. She'd barely taken them off since Jake had given them to her. Thought you might want this, she said, offering the canteen. Jake drank, then passed it to Lily. The water was cold and clean, tasting of minerals and life. There's a council meeting later today, Kaylin said, to discuss expansion. We've proven we can defend this place. Now we need to grow it, build proper walls, expand the purifier capacity. Maybe even start farming if we can find soil that isn't completely dead. Ambitious. Has to be. We can't just survive. We need to live. She looked out at the wasteland. And we need to be ready in case Vex's allies come looking for him. This isn't over. It never is, Jake agreed. But that's okay. We'll handle it. Together. Kaylin glanced at him sidelong. You said you were a pilot. Before the crash? Yeah. There are ships in the graveyard. Old ones damaged, but the cores might still be intact. If we could salvage parts, maybe jury-rig something functional? She trailed off, letting the possibility hang there. Jake felt something stir in his chest. Hope, maybe, or ambition, or just the stubborn refusal to accept that they were trapped here forever. You're talking about building a ship from wreckage. I'm talking about options, freedom, the ability to trade with other settlements, or maybe even reach an orbital station if any still exist. She looked at him directly. Think you could do it? I don't know. Maybe. He thought about the task, the sheer impossibility of it. Then he thought about everything they'd already survived, all the impossible things that had somehow become possible through desperation and determination. But I'm willing to try. Good. Kaylin held out her gauntleted hand. Partners? Jake took her hand, feeling the servo motors hum beneath the metal. Partners. Lily tugged on Jake's sleeve. Does this mean we get to go to space again? Maybe someday, sweetheart, but not today. That's okay. I like it here. Lily looked up at Kaylin. Can I help too? With the building? Kaylin crouched down to Lily's level, her expression softening in a way Jake had never seen before. You already helped. You were brave when your father needed you to be. That's more valuable than any skill. Lily beamed. Then impulsively, she hugged Kaylin, her small arms wrapping around the warrior's neck. Kaylin froze, clearly not expecting the gesture. Then carefully, she brought her gauntleted hands up and returned the embrace, gentle despite the mechanical enhancement. When they separated, Kaylin's eyes were bright. She stood and cleared her throat. I should go. Council meeting to prepare for. We'll be there, Jake said. Kaylin nodded and walked away, her movements still carrying that predatory grace despite everything she'd lost. Jake watched her go. This woman who'd threatened to kill his daughter and then burned her hands to nothing to save her. Life was strange, he thought, full of impossible contradictions and unexpected grace. Dad, Lily said. Yeah. I miss Mom. Jake pulled his daughter close, feeling the familiar ache in his chest. Me too, sweetheart. Every day. But I'm glad we're here, with Kaylin and everyone. Me too. They stood there on the wall as the sun climbed higher, warming the metal beneath their feet. Below, the compound stirred to full life. People working, children playing, the purifier humming its steady song. Later that day, after the council meeting where they'd planned the next phase of construction, Jake returned to the central courtyard. The purifier was still running perfectly, clean water flowing in a steady stream. He'd checked it twice already, but old habits died hard. Kaylin found him there, 2 cups in her gauntleted hands. She offered one to him. "You said water is earned," Jake said, echoing the first words she'd spoken to him at the gates. Kaylin looked at the cup, at the clear water inside, then at the people around them drinking their fill without fear. She met his eyes. "I was wrong," she said quietly. "Water isn't earned. It's not a payment or a test." She gestured to the children playing, the families gathering, the compound coming back to life. Water is a gift, and the only requirement for receiving it is being alive and needing it. Jake took the cup she offered. The water inside was crystal clear, reflecting the sky above. "Tell Lily her mother would be proud," Kaylin said softly. Jake's throat tightened. She would be, of both of us. They stood together in the shadow of the machine they'd fought so hard to protect, drinking clean water under the harsh sun. Around them, the compound hummed with life, damaged but standing, scarred but unbroken, alive. It wasn't the life Jake had planned, wasn't the future he'd imagined when he'd set course for SETI Colony with his wife and daughter, but it was real, it was hard, and it was theirs, and that was enough.